Before we break out into the small group again, wanted to bring everyone together, just a quick discussion. So if you could help me get everyone back from your teams, we'll give everyone just a minute. Yes. So just for a minute or two, we're going to stay all together. Just have a quick announcement. Oh. Okay, it does not look like everyone's back yet. So I'll just put another minute on the clock before we get started. Hallie's going to help us round people up. Hallie's here, by the way. Okay, so we'll just double check. We'll make sure Hallie wrangles up anyone else that might be missing, and then we'll get started in a second. Okay, so we just wanted to address something that's come to our attention, and we've kind of seen it in the small group as well as actually the one we're looking at right now. So there's been a little bit of confusion about what's been going on with the drafts. So what's happened, you'll see, is that a lot of times sections have gone from a small group, then sent to a prep team, and then that prep team oftentimes decides certain portions need to go to Dell Tech. And then when they come back, you'll see the boxes, and sometimes they may not have captured the exact intent, right, that the prep team may have wanted. And so that's what just happened to us in this large room. And so I just want to point out that the purpose of the Dell Tech is that trying to capture your intent, trying to support this process, still trying to honor the work that you did. But if it doesn't work for the team, for the whole team, that's fine, right? Just like we did with 0107, we can strike it out and work back with the original language that the last small team worked on. I think some people have had some confusion because the drafts came at different times. And so on our end, from a facilitation standpoint, we're trying to do our best to get you the drafts as soon as possible. As you know, there are many sections, so we apologize if it hasn't gotten to you enough time for review before today. We do ask that when we send these out, when Lori sends them out, it actually goes to the team leads. So after we send it, it goes to team leads, and team leads send it out from there. So we only have one more month left, but we'll ask for your help from the team leads to get them out to your teams in a timely manner so that everyone does have a chance to review and make sure that any Dell Tech that is written does reflect your intent. So again, just want to point out, Dell Tech really there to help, support. If we don't want to use it, it's okay. It's meant to be a supporting document. So that's all. Just want to clarify and ask again for your help getting things out timely. Any comments about that? Anything that we can do better as facilitators to help with this? Okay, great. All right, thanks everyone. We'll go back out into the small group with Zane for 0100, and then in the large group we'll pick back where we left off on 0107. So we'll just give everyone a few minutes to go to the correct rooms. Okay, so we're gonna get started again on 0107. So for 0107, I'm actually gonna call for Deltec assistance on this one to clarify the intent of the last sentence. So the last sentence reads, in-service training requirements must be completed after 12 months of cumulative employment unless indicated otherwise. So is it at 12 months, you have to have completed the in-service trainings, or after you've worked somewhere 12 months, then you start your process of in-service training? Did you get the question? Okay,
Sort
so
of.
you can
What
answer.
sort of, and I can at least say what the intent is. The intent is that you, in your initial, like when you start working at a child care program for the first time, you would need to get child care basics, and then 12 months from your hire date, you would start the in-service training. Well, yeah. So like the first year would be childcare basics. Does that make sense? So first year would be childcare basics, and then the second year would be the first half of enhancing quality early learning, and then the third year would be the second half of enhancing quality early learning.
So I think it should read then, after 12 months of cumulative employment, in-service training requirements begin. It's not the best sentence, but that's closer to your intent. Is that right?
Yeah, and then the tech writer can take it from
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Okay, so we have after 12 months of cumulative employment, in-service training begins, unless otherwise indicated otherwise.
The otherwise indicated would be like if you're enrolled in college or something like that. That would. So there's other reasons why you might not do it.
I'm not sure.
Sorry. Yeah. So where it says unless otherwise indicated, that would mean like if there's something that in policy and implementation that would mean you would not have to be actively taking the in-service training. So if you're enrolled in college would be, I think, the one that we have so far.
So maybe the wording's not great there, because I don't think that sounds like that.
And I think, was the unless otherwise indicated, was that center language that we're trying to evaluate? Okay.
Sorry, Kat.
So that's an interesting because that was our biggest question. The unless otherwise indicated thing really, because it's in this section that's about timeline, really I thought was only about timeline, right? It's not about whether or not you have to complete the trainings. So I think we need to be a lot more explicit about that. And moving down, the enhancing quality of early learning. So I guess my question here for you guys is, if you already have the certificate, do you, after I start, I have my short certificate or my medium certificate, or my initial, whatever the names of those are. When I get to this center, do I have to do, I know I don't have to do childcare basics, but do I have to do enhancing if I actually have my certificate or my AA or my BA? Is that the otherwise indicated part? Because that's not, I'm not getting it in the language here. Yeah, don't ever turn it off. That's the lesson.
I guess so, right?
You guys can afford the batteries.
That's right. I think, oh, did you have a question you want to ask before I answer? I see your, I don't know, is that?
Okay.
Oh, so we were talking about the same kind of thing, the equivalency. If you've proven you've had this, so maybe you're a rated facility and you've already completed, and you've proven your higher quality of standards, or if you have your degrees, we were wondering if there was a way to take this equal training and stage it. So here's what you would need to complete if you were at a level 2 rated site, or if you have this degree, here's what you would need to complete if you're at a level 3. So maybe we don't, if we're, a level 4 rated site, maybe we don't need all of this. Maybe there's just a couple components. So is there a way to stagger this based on equivalency of what we've already completed?
Yeah, I would say we'd look for the language that says something like DEL approved or something like that, because equivalency, we're really trying to hold that only to degrees and talk about equivalent degrees. So we're trying to keep the language consistent. So that's why the word equivalency doesn't show up when we're talking about in-service training. But I get where you're going with that.
So, just to reiterate my question,
Yeah.
if I have a certificate of some sort, do I still have to take this training for which I do not get college credit? Even though I am soon to be required to get this extended version of the certificates.
Right. So if I am currently enrolled in college, then I wouldn't have to take this class. If I've finished my certificate, then would I need to take this class? And unfortunately, the most I can say is that is really more about the implementation, because we have a pretty great, solid understanding of like what's going to be in this class, and we're really looking at it as like what's our state system like, and really talking about it from that degree and that angle. And so it's hard to say, like we would have to probably align with the colleges to be able to answer that explicitly.
So I don't want to be a big problem here, but I actually consider this to be quite strange that we are setting up a separate parallel non-credit bearing requirement at the same time that in the other room we are requiring everybody to get certificates. And especially when I'm not clear about what you're talking about when you're talking about this class and how much overlap there is with the stuff that we already have to do in these certificates. It's very amorphous to me, and I don't know that I want it written into the WAC that we need to do these 10 hours. I mean, for us, we're going to ask for a variance on this because we do a big system of constant quality and data analysis to figure out what our areas of need are and what we want to focus our professional development on. And this is probably not going to fit into that. And we need the time to be able to do intensive training with teachers. But even for all of these other groups, they probably have a similar approach in many ways, right? They're looking at their teachers and they're saying, okay, we really need to focus on math or whatever, and do we need, I mean, is this fairly general thing that we don't have an idea of what it is going to be, I mean, that's just going to be, okay, for the first 3 years, we're just going to write that off in terms of intensive training because we don't have enough time.
We have a comment from Family Home, maybe that before you answer. It's related.
So you made the comment that if you're going to school currently, you wouldn't have to take these classes. But if you weren't going to school, then you'd have to take them. So how does that enter into when I'm done with school and I have my degree, then I have to take them? Or have I already met the requirement because I'm in school?
Yeah, the idea and what I'm trying to explain is if you think of it as like, there is going to be degree qualifications for working in early learning, and then there's also this in-service, this continuing ed requirement. And so the idea would be if I'm in college right now, then I'm kind of off the hook that year to have to worry about my in-service training. But once I hop off the college route and am not an active student, then I would be expected to get continuing education or in-service training.
Would it have to be this?
So how we've been thinking about it is that childcare basics are given the baseline, so it's a minimum. And this is the next level after the minimum, so everyone will have this baseline, not only at the minimum level, but actually a little bit higher than the minimum. So it's a next step, correct. So this is kind of our way of establishing a baseline. Not a minimum baseline, but a real child development and interaction with children baseline. So in some way, just think about it, in any profession, you have to proceed with professional development steps. So you have your initial professional development steps with the childcare basic, and then it's the next professional development step, which is, and it's not in addition to 20 hours, I mean, annual 10 hours. It's counted toward the 10 hours. So if you're taking it, you don't have to take an additional one.
Yeah, but there are still opportunity costs involved in taking this instead of something that maybe in my own practice I really need better training on, right? I mean, having this generalist 10 hours may not be what I, as a teacher, really need. Maybe my problem is that I'm not very good at assessments and it's actually bothering my director, right? So maybe I need better training around that, but I only have a certain number of hours that I can actually spend in training in the year, right? So, and I guess my biggest concern is that we actually are required, I mean, when we talk about in the other room, when we talk about the certificates, the language that they're using over there too is this foundation, this baseline. But we're now setting up two parallel foundational concepts, right? But this one is not credit bearing, and so there's no stackable ability for us to use this, right?
Correct.
So this is my concern about
This is an ongoing professional development pathway that we would like to establish. So
to me, I wonder if this makes it just makes a lot more sense for me to write into this that this is for teachers who have not yet gotten the certificates, right? So I can understand you having this system for teachers who are not in school or who have not yet received the certificates that hopefully include most of this information. But otherwise, it feels duplicative to me. I mean, maybe it's not, but I don't have a clear understanding of what's in
So
it.
we're open for the suggestions. Whatever suggestions you would like to add to the language, we are open to hear them.
So I do want to point out what we've pulled up on the screen. So this is the visual of what we're talking about and what Michelle was talking about. The top one being the certificate path. So while you're in that certificate path, you don't have to do these trainings in the bottom. But until you hit the EC state certificate, then you come down. So hopefully this is helpful for people who are visual. So we have one comment over here, and then we'll come over here.
And we agree with what ECAP is saying in this, on having two separate standards here. But we also find that when we talk about equivalency, we are referring to not just degrees, we're referring to early achievers, because that is the state's chosen high quality rating system. That needs to go into effect too. That needs to be counted towards something. If we are a level 3 or 4 rated facility, we probably don't need this baseline training in setting up environment or working with children. Maybe we scored super high in our class component. This is kind of a waste of our time to go back and repeat this when we could spend our time training on stuff that our facilities actually need, like going and doing assessments or something that's going to benefit us better than trying to put out a general training that's supposed to be one size fits all, where it's not going to.
Right, we have a comment from Susie first. From Centers.
I would like to second that last comment, and from the ECAP group as well, that this is an ongoing problem that we see is a deficit of Department of Early Learning and their commitment to our training. We want to be professionals, and yet when you mandate that we take remedial classes, that we've already done the work, it means that you do not trust us to say, this person could really benefit from such and such, that we are no longer the professionals, and that DEL has to then dictate what we do with our time. We agree, ongoing professional development, really important. We also think that we are professionals enough and should be treated as such that after we get some of these certificates that you are mandating, we are left to our own devices to have a plan for what our employees need, when they need it, how much they need it, and who they're going to get that training from. And when you do this and undermine that by giving us remedial work, even if you think it's step 1 and 2, if I have a PhD, a master's, an ECE certificate, I'm already at step 10. And you are wasting my time.
Does Deltec have a response? Okay.
I don't think we have any problems. Because again, whatever language you will propose, we are fine with equivalent or whatever other language you would like to add into it, or how you would like to formulate it. We appreciate that you are acknowledging that despite the fact that some people will go for ECE, we still need to have ongoing professional development. And some providers do have a capacity to do on-site ongoing professional development, and some may not have a capacity to do that. Then they will have an opportunity to have ongoing professional development through Dell provided professional development.
Okay, so it sounds like, go ahead.
So I guess let's go back up to 1. I would, so I guess it's number 2, or B, A. So I would suggest that we amend this to say that this, so first of all, I actually think that what you guys keep telling us is that this is 24 months after you do childcare basics. So it's not really being hired, it's after you complete your first childcare basics. Isn't that right? Isn't that what I keep hearing from you guys? Because you're saying that it's the first year you do 10 hours and then the second year you do 10 hours, but in the first year you're doing childcare basics, right? Or something, right? Okay, so I do think that needs to be finessed a little bit, but so it's within 24 months of completing childcare basics, maybe?
Okay, so that's how, thank you, Lori. I think that's how Lori has written it now.
And then it says maybe something like this training would be required for only for teachers and staff who are not either enrolled or have completed the ECE certificates or Dell approved alternative, not equivalent. That's not what I mean.
On this. So for those of you that don't know me, Nicole Rose, Department of Early Learning, I really want to honor what I'm hearing about. For those of us who have degrees in ECE, please honor that work that we have done and allow us to really think about then where we need to hone in that training. As we think about this training series, the only place where you would be getting what we are proposing to put in there is if you have a state ECE certificate or if you've got a degree in ECE. So for those other initial certificates, you would still need to do this. So I just wanted to put that out there as you're looking at that language.
So I wonder if part of the challenge here is, I mean, obviously part of the challenge is that we don't really understand what's inside of this thing, but I wonder if it's also that we're looking at it as a block of 20 hours. And I wonder if, maybe 10 of those hours are included in the initial certificate or in the, so I wonder if I would suggest that you guys go back and look at what you're planning and figure out what is the overlap, because we are requiring everybody to get these certificates and they're getting college credit and they're on a path. So I just do not want this to be duplicative.
So we have a comment from Center, Rachel.
I think equivalency would work here because we said equivalencies was only talking about the certificate. So it would be ECE certificates or equivalencies because that's what the equivalencies are for the certificate. So I feel like we could use that language here. And so I just want to clarify that with the 24 months after completing childcare basics, they only have 3 months according to whatever section it was in before. So within 27 months, we're asking our employees to do 50 hours of training if they're don't have a certificate. And some of our employees may not get the initial or the state or whatever certificate within those 27 months. And so then we're in this rock and a hard place where they may not have that yet because that requirement is not within the first 27 months of being hired, or they can't get that degree within 27 months because of their schedule. So then would they be, it's just tricky.
We have a comment from licensing.
Okay, I think that this is kind of misworded. I think the 24 months would begin after the 12 months from when they took their basic. I mean, number one is clearly stating you don't have to start in-service training until 12 months after. And so then this was one of the problems I had early on, in that this seems to conflict with number one because it's saying within 24 months. But I think it should be within 24 months of completing childcare basics or after
We
or
could
something.
say
But
within 36 months of being
Yes.
hired in a licensed facility.
yes, that would make sense because I just think 1 and 2 are not aligned properly right now for timelines.
So I wonder if we're at a good point, since we've heard everyone's intents and what you would like to see, and some of this is like wording on numbers of months. If we could ask Deltec to work on this now while we move forward and then come back to it. Are there any other comments you guys want to share with them before they move into that? Okay, I'm going to measure consensus on sending this to Deltec right now, and we'll move forward. We would see this as soon as they finish. We want them to work on it right now. Because right now they'll have, originally they worked on other language, but we can work on it based on these new comments. Yes? Licensing.
I wondered if number 1 we can do consensus on. It's number 2 that we're having a problem with. It's just an idea. If you want to send both, that's fine.
1A. It's 1A that has a problem, but I think 1B, C will also have the similar issues. So it's all of 1. Yes. Okay. So let me first measure consensus on sending it out, and then what we'll do, if it's a yes, we'll go through and make sure you get all of the comments on each of the different requirements. So we'll start with consensus on sending it out to Deltec and having them work on it right now. Okay, so I see consensus across the board. So let's go through. We got your comments on enhancing quality, early learning, equal. So B, in-service training, total of 10 hours, completed every state fiscal year. So let's receive some comments on here too, to guide Deltec. Yes, so we're still working on B. We are going to send all of 1, but I just wanted to get some comments. Any other comments on B before we send it out? My take reviewing it is that you've already said most of your comments that apply to both A and B, but let me know if you have any other ones.
So,
What? Oh. Okay, so on B, Lori, under B, it says in-service training, after an early learning provider completes the equal training required in subsection, that should be 9 of the section. Any other comments about B before we move to 2? Sure. Okay, we're gonna have a 2-minute caucus.
Can we, this is Centers, can we sidebar with ECAP for a minute? Katie, can we come talk to you?
Yes.
centers?
So just going back to the same issue that we talked about before, but the department determines how many hours of the 10 hours total are required per core competency and how many hours are elective. We would like to have that taken out. Because if we have a teacher that really needs to focus on assessment, we want them to be able to take up to 10 hours of assessment and not have to do all these other core competencies. Because we really feel like this is one of those areas where we need to let the professionals in our field decide what they need training in, not have to meet some requirement. Because checking with the Dell Tech, they said there were 7 core competencies. So if they require 1 hour from each core competency in a year, or even, this year you have to hit 3 hours of this and 3 hours of that. If that's an area that I feel like I'm doing really well in, but there's other areas I need to hit, I'm going to have to take classes that, again, the remedial factor where I may not need to take a class in that particular core competency. So it just feels like we don't need to be micromanaged in what classes we're taking.
So let's give Lori a second to catch up there. So I think basically you want to strike the department determines how many hours of the 10 hours total are required per core competency.
Yes, exactly.
Could we just strike that for now, and that would be probably easier for the doctor? Okay. Strike, it's that sentence that's highlighted in blue right now. The department determines how many. Yep. Okay, that's our ECAP.
And we're supportive of that. When I was thinking about this feels like one of those implementation things, right? Where this is an area where a licensor would come in and give you some advice about how you should be focusing your professional development based on what they're seeing, or your early achievers coach, or whatever it is. But in terms of the regular operation of your center, it's kind of like how we say that the parents know their children best. The same is true of a center director or a family home director or an ECAP director. We really have our finger on the pulse of what kind of professional development is needed.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on subsection B? Okay, let's move into number 2. This is that,
So
that was 1A and B. Okay. So now let's strike this box info. I think they look very similar though. So the new 2 is that these specific positions, must complete at least 3 hours of the 10-hour core competencies each year. In total. 3 of the 10 hours total in core competency, professional development, and leadership each year. So it's the same comment I'm hearing as before that so basically I think I'm hearing you want to strike this because you want to be able to choose the topic.
So I honestly don't have as much of a problem with this one as the other one because, I guess I do think it's a little micromanagey, but directors, probably do that. That's the section of the core competencies that apply most closely, but I don't know why it's 3. I would defer to the centers about this one.
Do you need a team caucus? I think centers and family home, you probably, okay. Centers and family home, are you open to a sidebar? Great, so we'll put 2 minutes on the clock for a sidebar. All right, centers or family home providers. We'll hear from you. Family home?
So basically in our conversation, we said instead of mandating that we have to take 3 hours of, certain classes, what if we just put that we made sure that our competencies varied and that we were making sure that we weren't repeating trainings year after year after year, that we were kind of making sure they were varied trainings and they covered different competencies. Yeah, we don't mind the 10 hours. but
She's
the-
not striking, she's putting the comment there.
Okay. So instead of telling us we have to take 3 hours in a certain area, how about just saying you have to take 10 hours? They need to be in various competencies and they have to cover, a broad spectrum instead of just being able to repeat the same training year after year after year.
Okay.
I guess my only concern about that is this scenario that was brought up earlier about wanting to take, if I really need to improve in my ability to do child assessments, it's going to take longer than being able to do a 3-hour class here and a 2-hour class here. It might take my 10 hours. And so I don't even know if I would want them to say a whole raft of options.
Go ahead.
Well, I think the intent of this one, we already have this as part of our WAC, that as administrators, we take a certain amount of hours annually in admin. So I think, because this is center directors, licensees, I think that is what the intent is here, if I'm correct, is that you guys want us to have some leadership some leadership type training since we're supervising adults. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if the licensing, Deltec or licensing heard that question. That is how I read the separate subsection, though. I need. Are you guys ready for a question? Yes.
So reading over this, we already have something similar to this in our WAC, where as an administrator, we have to take a certain amount of hours in admin. So I'm assuming this is similar to that, trying to say that as a center license or licensee, we're taking leadership courses because we're supervising adults. Is that the intent, is that we're having some sort of leadership supervision of adult type training?
What I'm looking for is what the Deltec writers wrote in comparison to what came up in the prep meeting to compare, because we were thinking that the 3 hours for professional development and leadership, that we deleted that part because of the renewal series. So I'm trying to, so give me just 1 minute, please, to make sure I'm tracking and can compare the two documents.
So why don't we keep the note in here that that's the question, and if that is the intent, that they'll include that, and then we'll review that after, so that we, in an effort to keep moving forward. Okay. Any other comments on number 2? Okay, let's go to number 3. Number 3 is around the self-assessment. And this is specific to the leadership in programs. So is there a non-box language? Okay, yes. Yes, it's that one. So let's we can get rid of both of those in the box. Yes, that's good. Thanks, Laurie. Okay, so that 5 can be 3, and that 3 can be 4. Okay, so this is the new 3. It is about completing, the leadership must complete the Strengthening Families Program Self-Assessment or equivalent assessment as approved by the department. Within 12 months of this date, the section becomes effective, or if you're already employed, 12 months of being licensed. If already employed, or 12 months of being licensed. Any comments on 3 for the Deltec writers? Yes, Rachel.
080 is almost identical language to this, so we would say strike this from this section.
Any other comments or responses to that before we send it?
0080, family support self-assessment. If you'd like me to read the section out loud, I can.
I don't know if they're going to do this, but if they check and it's true, if it was NA here, would that be appropriate, just to have all the trainings in one spot?
It is almost identical language, so I don't see the reason to. It's not really a training. It's an assessment for your center.
Okay. Anyone else on the self-assessment? Okay, last one then, number 4. So this is still pointing to the leadership positions must complete the renewal trainings that include business and leadership practice training and child development training. And then this talks about the cycle, the 3-year cycle. Okay, licensing, then family home.
Just so you know, one of the things I've went over and verified is that the 3 credits that was referenced here earlier on the for the professional development and leadership would actually be part of at least year 1 and year 2 cycle. It would be incorporated in that, so you wouldn't be doing both because the 2 would be at least sort of blended.
Is that FYI in a way to, would you have a language change to make that more clear, or are you just an FYI? Okay, thank you. Family home?
My comment would be that these trainings where we go through a cycle and we do business and leadership 1 year and the next year child development, what we're seeing is the trainings that we're taking that are available in areas are repeated trainings. So even though the training might be 3 years, you have to renew it, we're learning the exact same thing. We're not getting new content. It is the exact same class being repeated. So we find it redundant to have to go and retake a class every 3 years that's going to give you this exact same information. They're not changing. Math for Toddlers has been Math for Toddlers for 5 years. It's the same class. It's repeated every year. So if we're talking about this, there's got to be some kind of accountability for Dell to make sure that this is a progressive training. So when we're going back and in 3 years, we're taking another professional development, that the class is new. It's new content. It's moved up to another level instead of just repeating the same content every 3 years.
All right, 2 minutes? 2-minute team caucus. Tracy, we're having that here, but we're also putting on the implementation in parking lot.
Chairs look like you could just slide past them. We're done with our need for caucus if other people are. If this is related to what we've already talked about in number 2, then my suggestion or our suggestion is to strike this and get it in number 2 to be the way that you want it to read and not have 2 separated things that are related but aren't clearly related. So we do not like this cycle bit. We understand that we need some leadership, we need some child development, and we need some, whatever the third one there is. So let's get the language to reflect that in number 2 and strike number 4.
Okay, so we have that strike 4 and incorporate into number 2. That's right, Kat.
So I know that the business and leadership thing is actually required as part of CCDF. So that is the one thing that I think needs to remain in here. I was just asking Dell whether this is 10 hours of business and leadership or whether this is a 3-hour class or what. And so I would like a little clarification about what this really is, because I would have a lot of concerns if it was that much. When I know we have other priorities around training even for ourselves. And then in terms of the child development, that I'm totally with you. I feel like that is, we decide what element of the training core competencies that we really need. The critical part here is that the business and leadership part, we still need to include that in WAC so that we are in compliant with the CCDF. But in terms of implementation notes, I would like more clarification around just how long that training is, and I would get rid of the rest of it.
We'll do the note here for Del Checkers right now that the CCF requirements around business and leadership, that specific training. And then Heather, Hallie, if you could help on the parking lot, having more information about what's included in business and leadership.
Yeah, and I would also make a note here that we're going to require a variance on this because no childcare business and leadership training is going to work for a Head Start director.
Okay, and I think that with that same one, we've already written this, but probably echoing over here, Family Home, saying that if it's going to be a requirement, that it should be varied and progressive, so you're not getting the same content every year. Yes.
And I just want to answer Katie's question. So in regards to the renewal training series, we're not saying that each of those topics is 10 hours per topic. What we're saying is in each of those years, please go back and get some training on each of those topics, which count towards your 10-hour ongoing in-service requirement per year.
Okay, so I think with that comment and the clarification, they're just looking for the language to be reflected in this new version. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, so what I think Lori is doing is getting the document ready to send to Del Tech so they can work on it right away. We'll give Lori 2 minutes on the clock, and then I'll go ahead and say that we're going to go back to the one that was tabled about L&I, and licensing has a clarification on that, so we can untable that and call that consensus reached. Get you guys prepared. We're going back to 0106, subsection 12. 0106, subsection 12, around L&I, blood-borne pathogens. 0106, subsection 12.
This is the one that we were wanting to do a little more research about labor and industries and what they would require. And they are requiring that everybody be trained prior to the possibility of an exposure to a bloodborne pathogen. So therefore, that would mean that they would need to be trained prior to being in the classroom with children. And so the way it was originally written kind of indicated that, and we did a little bit of language tweaking in terms of the training had to meet L&I standards. It doesn't have to be the L&I training, but it needs to meet their requirements. But it does have to happen before they are in a classroom with children or in caring for children. Which is, I think, what that says right there. Yes.
we have a question, yes.
How does this address the 16 and 17-year-olds?
Well, the 16 and 17-year-olds are not allowed to respond to this stuff. The way we were reading the WAC, the LNI WAC, they would still need the training, even though they wouldn't be, they are not supposed to, by LNI standards, be involved in any kind of bloodborne pathogen. There's a difference between the training and being assigned to take care of those kind of issues.
That we had was, does the bloodborne pathogen training that comes with American Red Cross and the, what's it called, ASHE and the other, does that meet the LNI standard?
What you would need to do is look at the LNI list of things that it says has to be covered. And if it covers all of those things, then yes, it would. So I can't tell you today, yes, it does. I would tell you that that is what you would need to make sure that they were covering all of those aspects. And as long as they are, then yes, it would.
All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. Does 12 reflect the language change then? Can I read it aloud for consensus? All right, so I'm going to read number 12. It says, early learning providers who directly care for children must complete prevention of exposure to blood and body fluids training that meets Washington State Department of Labor and Industries requirements prior to being granted a license or working with children. This training must be repeated pursuant to Washington State Department of Labor and Industries regulations found at, the reference is there, and it is a weight of 6. Yes, family home.
Not just providers, it's all staff that come into contact with children, correct? It says early learning providers.
And I think in definitions, early learning providers is all people who are providing care to children.
Okay.
Okay.
We can do caucus whenever you guys are ready. Oh, she must be here too. For the whole, I'm the scout.
Oh, you're the scout. Okay. Do we want to pause then, or should we take consensus on 12? Okay, let's take consensus on 12, the language and the weight. Okay, so I see from Head Start ECAP, I see 5s, and it looks like 1 4. From parents, I am seeing all 5s. From licensing, I see all 5s. From family home, I see 1, 2, 3, 4 4s, and the rest 5s. And from centers, it is your turn. Yes, they would like 30 seconds to caucus among themselves. All right, centers, are you ready? All right, so we're measuring consensus from the centers group. I am seeing all 3s. And so we have a comment, and we'll document that.
We understand the L&I regulations, but our 3 is just concerned about having something that is required prior to them even stepping foot in the room is going to be difficult for our hiring process. So,
Okay, thank you.
understand that the training is free and that there's these kits, but if we have a staffing like immediate need and somebody, you know, yeah, even though there's somebody else in the room who's completely trained in this, the fact that they have to have it before they can step foot in the classroom is just when that's not required of any other training. So,
Okay, so we've documented that concern, but we do have consensus on 12, which gives us consensus for that section. So round of applause. Yay! And then it sounded like the TA resolution group that was working on section 100 needs to caucus with your teams. How much time would you like? 10? All right, 10 minutes.
Feel free to sidebar, moderate.
Sure. So the potential is can be left can be left to the day they'll be able to take vacation and not to have any.
You guys have any
And for consistency, and that's what I mean, it's those, it's that hour in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. It is. It is. You wake up from nap.
Call me? What's up?
I'm actually on Luba too. Is she over here?
Luba is in the small room.
Or maybe there. Concept.
Just as an update on the clock, you have 2 minutes left of your 10-minute caucus.
Okay. Yeah. So that was one thing, but actually was a really good share. She said that my teacher goes on vacation or whatever. That on the other sense for that assistant teacher was stepping into those hours are while they were kids. And then they've been trained under this teacher. The challenge becomes you've got nobody in that classroom with the teacher qualifications. You're going to bring in somebody else, but you're likely going to bring in a sub to come back. So what do you do? You don't have subs that need to be teacher qualified. That's subs are great, right? I mean, that's just the field. So how do you navigate that? So there has to be some sort of intention. Can't open that classroom. It makes sense for the assistant. Can't be
So that was our 10-minute caucus. I did have a request from Family Home to have a sidebar conversation with licensing. Okay, and they said yes, so that we're going to put Family Home. How long would you like to talk to licensing? Three minutes? Okay, so we have a 3-minute sidebar between licensing and Family Home. The rest of you can continue to caucus.
How blue will Karen be?
Okay, so that was the 3 minutes that we had for the sidebar. You're requesting 2 additional minutes? All right, so we'll put 2 more minutes on the clock. Okay, so that was the additional 2 minutes for the sidebar. So we are actually scheduled at 2:30 to go to a 10-minute break, so we just have a few minutes. We can get started on our next section, and then we'll go into a little bit of a break. I know we've done a lot of talking, but people do need to stretch and use the restroom and take care of any other needs. So 110. So we're moving down to 110. So the next section that we are going to look at is section 110. There was one subsection in section 108 that we are going to read section 110 and take consensus on first, because section 108 refers to section 110, and then we'll get to go back to 108 and we can make a decision on 108, given that we will have made our decisions here at 110. Okay? So I'm going to read this section, and then it'll probably... Are we ready? Okay, so section 110, just as a reminder, we have some of our orange language there. This was negotiated by a small group in September. It was reviewed by our December prep team. So it is in queue for consensus now in January. The Del Tech writers have proposed some revised language. On number 1, there may be some discussion about it, but we will go ahead and we will read the language in the box the Del Tech writers have proposed. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to read through the section, then we'll go to break so that they can think about it on their break, and then we'll come back and take consensus. All right. So number 1, an early learning provider must have and follow written policies for early learning program staff. Staff policies must include those listed in subsection 3, which we'll read, of this section, and must be reviewed and approved by the department prior to issuing a provider's initial license. That is a weight of 1. Number 2, had been proposed to be moved to staff records. If you read in the notes, the Del Tech writers went through and reviewed the draft, and they felt this was a more appropriate place for this subsection, and this subsection was not addressed anywhere else, so they proposed to leave it here. So it says, 2, all early learning program staff must be trained on all early learning program policies and retrained as policies are updated or changed. That's a weight of 6. Subsection 3, we proposed to move to staff records, so I'm not going to read that. Subsection 4, An early learning program staff and policies must include but are not limited to A, all of the information in the parent or guardian handbook except fees, B, keeping staff records current in the electronic workforce registry, C, job descriptions, compensation and benefits, D, professional development expectation and plans, E, expectations for attendance and conduct, F, early learning program staff responsibilities for child supervision requirements, including preventing children's access to unlicensed space, child growth and development, age-appropriate curriculum, teacher-child interactions, child protection, guidance and discipline techniques, safe sleep practices if applicable, food service practices, off-site field trips, transporting children, health, safety, and sanitation procedures, medication management procedures, medical emergencies, fire, disaster, and evacuation plans, mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse, neglect, and exploitation per the RCW, implementation of child's individual health care or special needs plan, following non-smoking, vaping, alcohol, and drug regulations, overnight care if applicable, religious and cultural diversity, including all children and families, and non-discrimination. G, staff responsibilities if family home licensee, center director, assistant director, or program supervisor is absent from the early learning program. H, a plan that includes both how administrative and child care taking duties are met when a job requires such dual responsibilities. And I, observation, evaluation, and feedback policies pursuant to the WAC 0461. That is not weighted. Number 5, an early learning provider must have and follow written policies requiring staff working with the same classroom or group of children to share applicable information with each other on a daily basis regarding a child's health needs, allergies, and medication, any change in a child's daily schedule, significant educational or developmental information, any communications from the family, information to be shared with the family, and a plan for transitioning staff or covering breaks. That is a weight of 5. So it is 2:30. We have a 10-minute break scheduled now. So having just read that, keep those in mind when we come back. We're going to start back at 1, and we'll start taking consensus or gathering those concerns. So we're going to come back at 2:40.